With over 15,000 tools available, selecting the right MarTech can be challenging. Meet the MarTech Intelligence Report's free buyer's guides, exploring specific platforms including purchase considerations, leading players, adoption trends, and more. No matter where you are in the purchase journey, MarTech Intelligence Reports can help.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Zero to Launch. We are going to be talking about using AI for campaign creation and content at scale. My name is Molly St. Louis. I'm the co-founder of Mosaic Group Media, and I'm very excited to be here today as your moderator. Now, AI is a huge topic, and some of you who are joining us today, you may be at the beginning of that journey, just trying to figure out how to work it into your content workflows. We're so glad you're here. We are going to use acronyms and we will decode those acronyms to make sure you know exactly what we're talking about. Because we also have a lot of experts here who are at the later stages of their content AI journey, who may be thinking about brand implications and other complexities that come with using AI in your content. So, good thing we have an expert group of panelists today to help us through this. We have Lee Judge, co-founder and CMO of Content Monster. Hello, Lee.
Hello. Thanks for having me.
Angela Vega, Director of Capabilities and Operation at Expedia Group. Hey there, Angela. And Eric Mayhew, Co-founder, President, and Chief Product Officer at Fluency.
Thank you, Molly. Nice to see you.
Great to see you too, Eric. Okay, before we kick things off, everybody remember, if you're watching, please feel free to put your comments in the chat and we will do our best to answer them throughout the program. So without further ado, panelists, let's start with a rapid fire round. And Eric, I'm going to start with you. Tell me the number one AI tool you can't live without and one sentence about why.
Oh, I'm a developer. I work in this a lot, and I use Claude and Gemini all day long. But the things that I find unique, NAN is awesome. But the one I need Napkin. I am not artistic by any stretch, and I wish I were, but Napkin helps me convey ideas extremely well. It's really nice for me to bundle information up, have a concept, and just get that out there in a very graphical way.
Awesome. Napkin. I'm going to have to write that down. Lee, how about you?
I'd have to say mine is just the OpenAI platform in general and all the parts that come with it, including ChatGPT, because we use it for analyzing, coding, research, building automations. That's our leader at the moment.
Awesome. And Angela, I know you have a lot of feelings about this, and it's probably hard to choose just one. What would you say is the AI tool you can't live without?
Well, I will try to at least limit it to two. So I'll put the two that I know I'm using a lot these days. The first one is going to be Replit. I do a lot of product demos, and it's a lot easier to take those requirements and be able to turn them into something that other people can see. So you're no longer reading off of a Word doc, but you're actually able to visualize what you're trying to build for your customers. And then I've also really started enjoying using Abacus AI, which allows you to use all the really great models that exist, whether it's something from Gemini or something from OpenAI or so many other, that you can actually play with the different models and the outputs that they have.
That's amazing. I can't believe there are so many of these AIs that when was it first introduced to us? It's a different world now. But Lee, I want you to take us back to the beginning, how you started integrating AIs into your existing content workflows, how you're doing it now for sure. But if you can also think back to what lesson did you learn the hard way when integrating tools into your content workflows?
Well, so my agency, we create a lot of thought leadership content for businesses, and we have a lot of steps in the process that require taking what someone said and then restructuring it into articles and social posts and newsletters. And we go beyond just simple repurposing, because the key is to use only the content that the person actually said by a human. And AI allows us to do that. It allows us to remove a lot of the processes. It allows us to keep on brand and keep things on rails. But the lesson we learned the hard way is that these underlying language models underneath many applications, even the ones we build ourselves, um, they're not always up to date. So your shiny new tool that you just purchased or your automation you built could be using an old language model under the hood. So as a result, any AI automation we build has to be maintained and updated regularly. And we also try to use AI that is as close to the source as possible. That's why I mentioned OpenAI versus ChatGPT, because we'd rather connect directly to an OpenAI tool than to use a third-party app that's on top of that, and it's just a graphic user interface to the AI tool. And so, we have so many tools today, many of them, they're just purchasing a user interface to some.
Mhm.
And so that's like one of the biggest cautions I tell people. We learned that the hard way early on, that we were buying things that were not anything other than an interface on top of OpenAI, for example.
Got it. And is the implication of that that you are going to get out of date information, or is it that the content's going to come out weird? What's the output of having that the
Well, I'll
out?
give you a real example. The quality wasn't there. For example, when we had applications that involved writing content, and we wondered, why are we still seeing subpar 2022 content coming out of this application? It's a writing tool. Realize under the hood, they were still using ChatGPT 3.5, and we're already on 4.0 or 5 and the reasoning models and the better writing models. And we're like, why is this application not doing as well as the others? It's because under the hood, their LLM was outdated. And
Mhm.
so then we began thinking, okay, let's cut the middleman out and go straight to the LLM and keep an eye on the latest model.
Excellent, excellent. I wonder too, as people start to integrate AI into their workflows, uh, what what are the biggest barriers to entry? This is why we're going to launch our first poll. And audience, how you do it is you'll go to the right side of your screen, the upper right side, and you'll see an icon that says poll, and you will click on that. You can just enter your first name, and you're going to have four options to answer this question: what is the biggest challenge in your AI adoption? There are four options there, but if we didn't put in an option that was your actual answer, please feel free to put it in the chat. And please go ahead and vote now. I'm very interested, panelists, to see what everybody chooses. Um, we'll have some good things to discuss in just a few seconds. I will say that team resistance is a big thing for for me. I've had to work with a lot of teams that were thinking about that. Let's see. So our results here. Oh man, I'm in the minority. Team resistance is at 12%. Lack of consensus on AI tools, 30%. That's the winner. Fear of legalities, of course, and then internal red tape. Yeah. Any thoughts on that, panelists? Does this surprise anybody?
No, I guess it probably has a lot to do with the industry they're in, like whether they're regulated, how fast the company's willing to roll things out because of regulations. That probably has a lot to do with these results.
And
Mm-hmm.
they're all pretty interrelated, right? A lot of the reasons why internal red tape exists is because there are, of course, IT teams, HR, legal teams that are, of course, thinking of what are the repercussions if a machine gets something wrong versus a person. And that can also lead to a general, consensus of how leaders are thinking about AI versus the people, the boots on the ground, right? But, a lot of research has definitely been showing that, companies that have a really strong AI strategy that's been communicated all the way down to the people who are doing that work, that there is a lot more understanding and desire to adopt it in their day to day.
Yeah.
That's a great lens, and as we support advertisers and advertisers in large scale, and a lot of highly regulated industries, like you mentioned, Ailey, or one of the two of us mentioned that. Um, in that, I've seen things about data use rights, so that legality is obviously
Mhm.
super important. Along with that, there are concerns about who writes the check, who writes the credit check in digital advertising when there's a mistake. So you mentioned what happens when a machine gets it wrong versus a person. as a software provider, I have some anxieties because it could be me that writes that check rather than someone that verifies an AI response. So those are obviously things we want to stay compliant. We want to stay, brand safe. We want to do all those things well, or somebody's going to write a check, and that's concerning.
It is indeed. Eric, actually, I'm going to stay on you for this. How should content leaders approach implementing AI into their process, both from that strategic and tactical standpoint, kind of tying together what Angela also just said about the varying levels of a company? How are you looking at
I definitely have two thoughts on that, and they're very different. The first one is understanding your risk tolerance. There are things that you can and can't accept for risk. You can be right in some areas. You can be a little bit looser in different spaces. And if you go through your processes and identify where you have some risk tolerance, those will give you those early, easier to harvest opportunities for you to use AI without mass amount of infrastructure and uh, confirmation and all those pieces that you need. So risk tolerance is a big one. But the reality is that the next piece that I really like to think about is what was good for business before will be good for business after AI. So AI today, like if we look at right now, I would say AI is relatively novel. If you're using it, you've got somewhat of a competitive advantage. But it'll be ubiquitous eventually. It will be everywhere. So what we need to think about is, well, how do we differentiate ourselves in the use of AI? What is the thing that makes my agency or my marketing team unique, and how do I tell a story that's special? So if we can think about the data that we have, AI works extremely well with good context. So good context windows, passing in relevant information. If we can think about the data that we have that's unique and the story that we try to tell that's unique as marketers, when we orchestrate our AI strategy, we would orchestrate our AI strategy around that, making our business differentiated. Otherwise, we've got a machine in space that will do a good job, and it will do a good job for my business or everybody else's business about the same. So think about what really makes your business unique and what values you have and what data you can bring to the table that makes that a truly unique experience.
that? I love that. Panelists, anything to add to that? Are you experiencing the same kind of feeling when you're doing your strategies?
Yeah, I would definitely like to add to it, probably from a more tactical perspective. And I recently actually posted an article on Martech.org about this. But the biggest win when you kind of come with AI is actually not just the automation, but it's the alignment. The fact is a lot of our processes that we have today exist because of the technology and the skill sets that we've had in place beforehand. We designed around those things. Now, if you're going to go about, as Eric was stating, on leveraging AI and something that makes it truly unique to allow your team to stand out, to tell your story, a lot of that's going to come with actually deconstructing the ways in which you do things today and understanding the jobs to be done and the outcomes you want, not the idea of who has to do it in a step that has to be taken. And so, especially when it comes to content and to creative, right? A lot of it between us, it can be anything from the idea of I create a brief, and then that brief hopefully is standardized in a way that is legible to somebody else, that then goes to a content and creative team, that they give versions, that get sent back to me, that then go to legal, that then go to, oh my gosh, so many steps. But the jobs to be done is, am I making sure that I'm providing something that's strong enough for someone, something, or a group of people or agents or machines to give me a output that is aligned with what my business, my objective, my content is? Can I make sure that it holds up to our brand standards, our legal standards, and things of that sort? Like, those are the jobs to be done. The way in which we do it will evolve, always with a human in the loop, in that sort of way, especially right now, because again, these model outputs are so variable. But I would strongly suggest, from the tactical perspective, is that as leaders, you need to take a look at a process from end to end, describe all the steps that happen today, and then you need to be really clear on if those steps are an outcome of a technology or a set of rules that maybe someone set 5 years ago and has long left. And do they serve you today? And how is AI best positioned to help support, not replace, but to help support getting to that outcome and that objective?
Absolutely. And Angela, I think also we're opening a can of worms on this one, on this next question. But now that we're talking about that scale, you are a director at a massive organization. How are you standardizing your AI across your team to maintain brand consistency?
Yeah. No.
Which is the next phase of what you were just talking about.
Yeah, I know. I definitely kind of have my view, and I'll definitely want to hear from Lee and Eric on this as well, if if y'all have something. But from some of these, I'm gonna throw out a little bit of terms, and so I'll kind of explain some of them. But it is a good way to kind of get started. So the first thing is leveraging something called a model context protocol, which is essentially just I think it was an API for these certain models, LLMs, to go reference a set of information, i.e., context, that it can then consume to improve the output of that model. So an example of something that you could host in this could be the idea of all your brand standards or all your performance sort of data. And again, this is just an interface for it to interact. There's also something called RAG, which is like retrieval augmented generation, I believe. But this is, again, providing a set of documentations, or I think who came out with the idea of like skills recently. I've heard that those have been blowing up, but yeah, it's a set of information that these sorts of LLMs and of agents can also access. And what I mean by all this is how I'm starting to think about it. I am looking from an organization, what are all the things that just, whether it's in email or in social or in some sort of PR release, that I want to make sure we have brand consistency. And where do I put that? So all of our agents, our agent architecture, our orchestrative AI has the ability to access that and have consistency. And then I'm also thinking about what are things very, very specific to the channels that I sort of own, and what's a different methodology of, because you can of course use an MCP, but there's also some work going into that. What's a different way in which I can provide that context? And the value of this is not only creating brand consistency, but it's also the fact that the ability for you to feed context to these models, it's quite expensive if you do it repetitively. I don't know
Yeah.
about you. I've run out my tokens pretty quick. And this is also a benefit that as y'all start, stepping more into using AI, right now costs aren't the top of people's minds, but eventually they will be. And being able to centralize these sorts of things reduces the cost and the consumption of what you need to be able to provide a better output.
I'll add to that.
I was just
Uh,
going to ask you. Yeah, because you have
well,
multiple clients, right? And you're having to do this for a lot of different
yeah,
things, right?
I think that what we do for multiple clients can even apply to a company with their multiple teams. We've had clients who, within their company, had multiple product lines that had different speak and different terminology, different technology. And so, just like we build a portfolio for each client that our AI refers to, within your organization, you may have different portfolios. You could even get down to an individual level, like this is how our CEO speaks, this is how our product team
Mm.
speaks, and you have these libraries of data that your AI can refer to, so that if you're writing product information, for example, it refers to that, and it knows all your terminology, it knows how you speak about your product, it knows what not to say and what to say. And so that's one way we standardize across our clients, is that every client, they get a build. We build their personality portfolio first,
Mm.
and that is isolated for that client in their own folder, so to speak, to keep it simple. And so that whatever we create for them is in their voice, and it's not contaminated by other content from the world or from other clients.
Hmm. Are you doing it for video at all, Lee? Are you?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So in the
Lovely.
video process, it's, let's say a client has research or a white paper they want to convert into video. So our job is to take that content that they already said, the human already said, and form that into a conversation, be it outline or notes or bullet points to hit, and that needs to reference their portfolio to say, how would they say this? Are there other things around this topic or product we want to also address? And then from that becomes a script or a plan for a video. So absolutely, even with video, having that MCP or that library of content for that one voice, that one client is still absolutely necessary.
Amazing. And yeah, audience, I know this is if you're early on in the journey, this is a lot to take in, understandably. And so we're going to bring it back for just a second. And Eric, I'd love for you to start with this question. What is the single piece of advice you'd give content teams about using AI successfully? And I'd like to add to that at the beginning of the journey and then later as in a more advanced stage. What do you
Awesome. First of all, I'd like to say, what an impressive panel. That was incredible to listen to. I mean, I work in this all day, every day. MCP servers don't come out as often as I wish they would. I have to work in that space. Tool use, function calling, all those pieces. The thing that I would love, this is kind of the journey that I went on with AI when I first started. I started going on the path of working with AI, and I treated it like software. And I think we all have a natural tendency to want to do that, to treat it just like software, thinking that we're going to put an input in and get a deterministic output out. And the reality is, it's really not that. My daughter was sitting over here on this couch. She was telling me what to do, and I started to see this parallel between what I was working with AI. I was getting suggestions, I was getting recommendations from the couch and from AI, and they were somewhat subjective, very human, definitely from my daughter, and surprisingly human from AI as we started down this path. So my mental model for this shifted a little bit. It shifted from AI as software to AI as user and coworker, counterpart. So if we can think about how, when you get started with this, think about the fact that you have an assistant, you have another counterpart to work with, you have a conversation to have. I just did one recently, which I thought was kind of compelling. I'm in the product seat, and company's growing. We just crested over 100 employees, and I wanted to really explore the concept of what does it mean to be a product-led organization when you grow to a certain size with a certain number of client volume. And it was just an amazing conversation. Now, I went and fact-checked everything. I went and made sure that I could cite other sources, but I had a good conversation. So I was able to treat AI a lot like another person. And that's kind of an interesting spot to be in. So if you go in with the expectation, we work with a lot of mathematical things in advertising, specifically, click-through rates and CPCs and cost per conversion. So it's not fantastic at math. It's suspect if you load large context models into it, ask it to figure out all of your performance data. It's challenging. So have good expectations on it. Treat it like a knowledgeable and not complaining coworker. Explore ideas with it, and then revalidate as you go forward. I do believe that there's a time where it will get more right than it is today. I put it probably in the 90%. That doesn't mean that 10% excludes all the value you get out of that 90%. I wouldn't count it for that 10%, but just make sure you're staying close to it with solid expectations about what is practical and what is real today, and eke that 90% of value out of it that you can now, as a coworker, as a buddy.
I love that. And if you are kind of more used to using AI, you might already think of it as that. At ChatGPT the other day, I asked it a question. It was like, Molly, no, stop thinking. And I was like, dude, okay. From what I know about you, this, and this, and this. And I was just like, oh my God, like, I feel like we're in a relationship now. It's got weird. So yeah, people need to think of it as a coworker. I do believe that a lot of us feel that way already. So thank you for that, Eric. Angela, what would you say is your biggest piece of advice you give teams about using AI successfully for content?
I'm definitely going to build off Eric a little bit here because I agree with that so much. It's not just the idea of obviously we're thinking about how right or how wrong. And if we think about it, humans are obviously very, very fallible too, right? It's not like the human is like, oh, if I get something correct 80% of the time, I'm doing relatively good. The fact that this thing can sometimes get even higher than that, but we look at that 10% and say that's the deficit. So it's no longer worthy or worthwhile. And I do think that's something that you will, at least I've experienced in how I'm trying to, evangelize AI, not just in the generative aspect, but also when we think about agents and workflows and things of that sort, that helping other people understand that when they go try it for the first time and they're just like, or they try away and like it didn't work. And I'm like, well, did it not work? Or did we maybe not, use the tool as it's intended? Because all tools are neutral, right? AI is a neutral tool. Every tool that exists in the world, just like behaviors, are all neutral. It's the way in which you use them and the application, the context associated with them, which brings me to the thing that I think is the most important piece of advice is this is still all about context. If you go to a coworker and you say, I need that thing with that thing by, next thing, they're like, what? However, I have seen in so many cases when I see people what they're, typing in either, to ChatGPT or Gemini, it's like, you didn't give it any information. You said please, which is lovely, but at the same time, you didn't actually give it the thing that you needed, the context. And that also goes for giving too much context, right? Sometimes we think we dump in all the stuff and that's going to make it more useful. That's not necessarily true. So as you're starting to understand like how to use AI successfully, it is about finding the right amount of context. And it's the right amount of context that you would give a person, right? In that same sort of way. If you went to one of your senior leaders and you go to the point to where you're describing every little single individual thing that's happened, they're going to be like, whoa, don't care about that. What's the outcome? What's the thing we need? The same thing if you're trying to do something very specific. Let's talk about coding or getting some sort of visual. In that case, you couldn't go like, give me something that looks nice, or I need this widget to appear here. You need to be more specific and you need to provide additional context. So I would suggest as you're going through this sort of experience that you need to experiment with what that sort of right context is for whatever outcome you're trying to get, specifically when it comes to content generation, whether it's copy, imagery, landing pages, etc. Find the right balance, but it can't be nothing and it can't be everything. It exists on a spectrum and it's probably somewhere towards the middle.
Hmm.
I'll add because I love the intersection of content and AI. That's where I live every day nowadays. And I would say if there was one thing I would give as advice would be to start with a human, whether it's a conversation, an experience, meeting notes, or even a sales call. Start with a human, then use AI to expand and scale that information. And here's why. If you don't, you're more likely to be repeating something that someone else has already said. That's what AI is doing, is predicting to say next based on what was already said. So AI only content will be short of novel opinions, at least for the near future. So lean into human sources first if you want to rise above the noise.
Absolutely. That's like a mic drop moment, Lee.
Awesome.
For humans. Well, it looks like we have a lot of questions from the audience. So I'm going to jump into those. From Robert, question for Angela. What is one example of your utilization of Replit in your day to day? How do you measure the value of that initiative?
Oh, yes, absolutely. So, what I do, what I need to do most of the time is get a lot of people on board with things that we're building. And that includes my engineering team, as well as some other product teams, and then usually the end users of the things that I'm developing, which is usually tooling for people to go execute things. The challenge that I've seen in the past that has now been relieved by using something like Replit is the fact that I'll write out my PRD, my product requirements documents of all the things that I need, the use cases, how we go through testing it. And what I think in my mind and what I'm expecting in my mind, and then what they give me as that first iteration don't align all the time very, very well. What it has helped me do is when I go and write, that sort of I first try to see how does the machine end up reading what I've written and how does it sort of develop that? And sometimes I can find gaps really quick. It says, ooh, no, I do not like that. And it's taking it in the most literal sense of what it is. So it's a good way to gut check that. But the second thing it helps is it actually reduces the amount of time and back and forth that I have between with engineering teams to say, I'm looking to get something like this. It doesn't have to look like it, But you can notice the functionality is that I want to go from this part of it to this part, or I want to dive deep into this, or I want to make sure that there's a gut check at this point before this thing publishes. And it allows me to have more fluid conversations in some sort of visual way. And it literally does not take that much time to build and to iterate. And there's so many other tools out there. Lovable is a great one, but I liked Replit because it is a little bit more dev and code friendly in terms of iterations than Lovable.
Amazing. Mr. Judge, we have one for you from
All
Cece.
right.
What are your future thoughts or directions on open AI versus third party? I heard a speaker regarding CPUS and how the open market have only hundreds of CPUS. The AI key players have hundreds of millions of it. It's exponential group growing into domination of AI. What are your touch points on this and marketing?
I'm not sure if I know what you mean by. I'm not familiar with that term.
CPUs.
CC plus. Oh, CPUs.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
I am so
Okay.
sorry, you guys. Oh, reading is essential. That. Thank you, my friend.
CPUs.
Okay.
I'm sorry, Mr.
So, okay, let me reframe. Okay, the question was, what's my opinion on OpenAI in terms of CPU use, I suppose?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the arms race for AI is none of my business. I mean, because that's like me trying to debate, well, Microsoft versus Google. I'm a user, and I can't control nor stop what they're going to do. So I won't get into that battle. I mean, I use OpenAI, and I'm what I can say is that if you try to use any other model, whatever evils you don't like about OpenAI, I assure you the other ones are doing it as well. So either you are on board with using the technology or you're not.
Okay. Yeah.
Can I add to that? Just I know it wasn't directed. Just one note. I completely and totally agree with that because I know that's a conversation that I also get asked as someone who's avidly using a lot of these different tools. And the thing is very commonly and historically issues where obviously massive corporations, if we think about global warming and how that is being committed through so many different acts of so many different companies, bringing that about. It's the same way we have to think about this, right? This isn't an individual person's solution to solve for how we think about it. It needs to be something that if we want to continue to use it, which inevitably is going to happen. Like there's no way that everyone's gonna be like, just kidding, we're going to stop doing this now because we don't like all the massive amounts of advancement we have. But it's something that we need to continue thinking about how we hold these sorts of governments, companies and things responsible for figuring out what is the best way for them to continue to advance the technology without creating any sort of undue harm on any particular group or environment and things of that sort. But inevitably, this will continue to grow, and your ability to decide how you want to use it is an ethical one that's between you, but it's not something that as an individual, it's not an individual problem. It's a global one that should be on the corporations and the governments, in my opinion.
I agree.
Very interesting question. Very interesting answers. We have a little bit of a simpler one. How do you know when to switch from free to paid for AI tools? Maybe less controversial on this one, maybe not.
I mean,
When it
for us,
becomes,
go ahead.
oh, well, I was going to say when you cross that profit line, like, does it make sense? Because some of the tools we use, if I'm spending $20 a month and I'm saving thousands, that $20 wasn't even a question in the first place. Like for most of the AI tools we use, I can't tell you off the top of my head how much we even spend on them because they save so much that it's negligible. So from free to paid, if the feature is worth it, then if that feature has a business value to us, then that's when we switch over to paid.
Yeah, and I'll piggyback on that as well. Once you've established that it does have a net positive benefit to your business and to your workflows, next look for features for like the data security and privacy component. When we moved into Bedrock specifically because it has a closed ecosystem and no data egress. Like those types of things might become more and more valuable as you once you've decided that it is part of your workflow. Obviously, the first and foremost problem to solve for. The next piece is data protection, credit volume, volume purchasing. So those are kinds of things that I think you'd look at next.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
I'll
would agree
add.
with that. Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say there's three more criteria we look at specifically. One is the community base. Is there anyone else using this?
Yeah.
Two, the API. Can we connect this to other things? If there's no API, it's probably no development. It probably won't last long anyway. So is there any API? Um, and then third, is it just a user interface on top of something else? Is it
Mhm.
just charading as a new shiny new tool when really it's just a window into Chat GPT or Claude or something? So those are the three things: API, community, and is it really a real thing or just a user interface?
Yeah, I would agree with that, and I would, change the API the way it is interoperability between different sets of tools, which you can do through APIs, webhooks, all sorts of things, but that can
Mhm.
be the challenge if you have a closed ecosystem that you don't necessarily get to leverage the external. I also love Innate because of its versatility and how many things it can integrate with, whether through an actual, native integration or you can do through various amounts of things, but completely
Mhm.
agree with everything that this group has said. Yeah.
And we have about 5 minutes left in time for one or two more questions. This one is an interesting one from Michelle. I'm in the marketing department at a digital agency and focus on internal marketing. My biggest challenge with AI is organization, bringing all the pieces together and keeping track of what's been created and where it is in the process, like ideation, in progress, or final. We move fast and have lots happening at once. So, revisiting past conversations or finding out the final output, especially after multiple versions, can be tricky, even with the project features and using new chats to keep tasks separate. I'd love a more visual way to see everything across a campaign or set a status for each piece. I mainly use the business version of GPT and would love your thoughts. So, anybody have ideas about more visual workflows?
This is one of those spots, and Ailey mentioned not being just a layer on top of an LLM, and quite frankly, I don't have the knowledge nor bandwidth nor money to ever build my own LLM. So in some ways, Fluency is an orchestration layer on top of multiple LLMs and AI tools. But that orchestration layer can be valuable also. So in this case, here's a spot where we're talking about individual AI agents working together to do those workflows that you're talking about. When they're common, like creative approval and creative drafting, like that, you can actually get tooling, the marriage of static software plus the AI world to work together. Request content, automatically index it, know where it's supposed to go, know how to retrieve it, know what context to bring it back into in future iterations. Those are some of the spots that I find workflow orchestration via AI to be extremely interesting from our perspective. So I think what you want to look for is some domain specific tooling that orchestrates those LLMs, and that can really help you with your problem space.
A lot of that problem is more of a isn't an AI problem, it's a processes problem
Good
that
call.
AI won't fix. So, for example, I think about how we compartmentalize some of our clients. Each one has a set of folders, whether it be a Google Drive or a SharePoint or whatever. Each one has their own isolated set of automations, and each one has their place in our project management system. Those are all tied together. So that if anything happens in one of them, the other one is alerted. If something changes on a file, it goes to a project management system. It may be written by our LLM, but each one is designated per client. And so whatever happens, it happens in those three places and it stays clean. But that was something we put in place, not with AI. It was just a process that we established before implementing AI,
The human part of it.
the
we are
human part.
we are definitely still in the loop. And panelists, thank you so much. I think that was our last question. Angela, before we end, did you want to add to that? We
I
have
just
about 6 minutes left.
I just wanted to bring it back to the top to say that this is about the jobs to be done. So you stated a problem, but what is really, or you stated the way in which you think you would solve it, which is visualization. What is actually the problem? What are the steps to be done? And unwind that, to your point, what Lee said, the process around it, because some of what you're looking for is probably just a process and automation, and AI doesn't really enhance anything. It doesn't add any value to it. And so just I would remind everyone, like, all the problems that you have today, deconstruct them. It's like a Lego thing. Deconstruct, put all your Lego pieces away, and then decide, what do you want to build next? Because you're not going to build the same thing in the same way. And
Amazing.
that's it.
Amazing to end on that. Remember, humans, stay creative. AI is your coworker, and it still needs us. But yes, if you have any other questions, please reach out to these candidates. They're experts in this area. Thank you all so much for joining us. Have a great rest of the conference.